Hi, this is Richard, and we're going over some skills to help you get started in Blender. Last time we talked about the difference between object and edit mode, and this time we're going to talk about the tool shelf and all the buttons on it. So we're going to start getting into some of the meat of how to do some stuff. So we're going to start in object mode. Your tool shelf is this one. See, it just went away, now it came back. I can hide that by hitting the T button, T for tool shelf. Hit it again and it comes back. If you don't have this, make sure that it's up by hitting T, and I should say that whatever window your mouse is in, that's the one that's active for your hotkeys. If I put my mouse down here on the timeline, I'll hit T and nothing happens. I put it up here and it pops in and out. So, or you can just grab here and push it all the way down and you get this little plus sign showing that it's hidden. You can click that again and it pops back up. I just like doing T if I need a little extra space to work. Usually I'll just leave this up because when you add new stuff, you'll get some options down here. So let's get started. Translate, that's the first one. This here is your transform tool with these red, green, and blue arrows, and translate is just moving things around. You can move whole objects. Both of these cubes are part of the same object, so I'm going to grab this red arrow and I can move it along the x-axis. Green arrow is the y-axis, blue arrow is the z-axis, and that's an easy way to move things around. Or I can just click inside that circle, this is left mouse button, and move it around. Let's try to put it on that back corner, and now if I move the camera with middle mouse button, it's not in that back corner. Let's grab it again and try to put it in that back corner. I move the camera again, it's not even close, it's more in the center. And that is because when you grab things and move them around just by clicking them, I should also mention you can right click on something and drag to grab it and move it. Or just left click inside that circle. If you just grab it like this and move it around, imagine that this window right here that you're looking into, this is your windshield, and you're just grabbing this object and you're wiping it around your windshield. So here is the top and bottom. It's all based on your perspective. And see, I'm grabbing this with my right mouse button. I don't even have to hold the button down. It just locks in that I'm grabbing it, and then I just move my mouse, and when it's where I want it, I hit the left mouse button. If I didn't want to grab it and I grabbed it accidentally, I'll hit the right mouse button again, and it goes back to where it started. So I hardly ever just grab things and move them because it moves it based on my perspective. See? Now it's way down here. You can't really move things towards you or away from you. You're just going to move things around your perspective. See, I can't put that back in the center until I get my view changed. So you can also hit the hotkey G to grab it, and it's the same thing. Right mouse button cancels, left mouse button places it. Just grab it and move it. I'm saying that because you have this button right here under transform. This is your transform tool, and this is your transform menu. These are the things you can do with your transform tool. G grabs it. What if I want to grab it and move it along that x-axis, but I don't want to hold on to my mouse button the whole time? I might be moving it exactly. I want to use the arrow keys to nudge it. I'll hit G to grab it, and X to lock it on the x-axis. Now I can just move my mouse, and I'll move that object along the x-axis, and if I go that way, it's not going to move it that way. It'll only move it on the x-axis. And if I just want to nudge it, I can hit left arrow just a little bit. I can hit right arrow just a little bit, and up and down, move it just a little more gently because it's locked on the x-axis. Again, right mouse cancels that. So that's how you move things. If I want to move it up, I'll hit G, Z to lock it on the z-axis, and then I can move it up and down. Mostly I'll just grab these and move it. Then we have rotate. Let's hit this button and see what happens. Well, now I'm rotating it around my perspective. So it's not actually rotating in the world like you were spinning a top. It's rotating based on my perspective. Let's hit R to rotate. Well, now that's different. Look, I click this button and it just rotates. The closer I get to that origin, the faster it rotates around because I'm going in a full circle. The whole object rotates in a full circle. I come way out here and it moves a lot slower. Right mouse button cancels. But if I hit rotate here, I got this little tool with this dotted line and these two black arrows, and it shows me how far out I am and I'm rotating. Now, one thing I do want to point out that just happened, if my mouse goes off of this side of the screen, it'll pop back on the other side of the screen. See that? And that's really handy when you're moving things or you are doing things like rotate. Like if I want to move it just a little, like a half a degree, not very much, if I start out my rotate right here, it's moving way too fast. Drag it out, and drag it out, and drag it out. Now I'm moving it super slowly. See how slowly that's moving? And then if I come back in, it moves super fast. So that's really handy for doing some of the very detailed work that you'll be doing, is that the mouse wraps around when you're doing some of these functions. And that's the rotate tool. Now you can also lock it to your axes as well, just like the translate tool. So let's hit rotate and Y. Now it's only rotating around the Y axis. Rotate, that's the R button, and Z. Now it's only rotating around the Z axis. R and then X. Now it's only rotating around the X axis. And because of my perspective, that one's a little more difficult to rotate since it's coming towards me and away from me. You kind of have to get a feel for it before you can start doing that. You might want to just change your perspective. At R and X, now it's easier. And that's rotate. Remember, G to grab, R to rotate, and then hit the letter of your axis to only grab it and move it, or to rotate it along that axis. Now scale, let's hit the scale button, and I move my mouse in, and it's getting really small. If I move it the other direction, it's getting really big. And that's the reason I don't like these buttons, because as soon as you click a button and start moving your mouse, it starts changing. I might want to put my mouse way out here if I'm making it small and hit S to scale it in. Or if I'm making it big, I might want to put my mouse really close to the little orange point there, that's called the origin, and hit S and drag my mouse out. And then S is to scale, S and then X will scale it only along the X axis. It's a good way to flatten things or to make them larger in one direction. Z, whoops, went into wireframe there. If I hit scale and then Z, it's only making it bigger along the Z axis, up and down. And then scale and Y, of course, is the Y axis. If you go past that origin, yeah, it'll flip things and make them weird sometimes. So just try not to go past that origin. And then we have mirror, which you're not really going to get into too very much here. You can hit that button and then hit an axis. See, nothing has happened. So then let's hit X. Now it just mirrored it across the X axis. Or let's hit Y. Or Z. Well, okay, let's hit mirror and then Z. Now it mirrored it that way, and Y. So it's just a different way. There's a better way to do mirroring that we can get into later. It might be handy for some things here and there. I've never used it. And then, alright, so in object mode we have duplicate. Hit that button and let's see what happens. Well, I just pulled 2 extra cubes off of those others, and now they're a separate object. And I can go into edit mode with tab, remember, and edit these, tab back out, separate from these, where I can tab in and edit those. So let's hit delete and enter to get rid of that. There's also the hotkey, which is Shift D. See? That did the exact same thing, and it's a lot quicker if I just let my hand rest with my pinky on the Shift button. Especially if you've got a few things that you want to make. You know, pull that one. There you go. Got a bunch of cubes now. Control Z, of course, undoes whatever you want. And then duplicate linked. If I move these, they're still separate objects, but there's something different about these. Watch. Alright, now that I've got those, I'm going to tab in. Why did it not do that? It should. It's acting screwy. Any changes you make to linked objects should happen to the ones that are linked. It's not working that way right now. It might be because I'm sharing my screen. Sometimes that makes some things funky. But you could do that by hitting Alt-D. And then when you squish things and change them, it'll happen to all of the things that you have linked. It's good for doing grass or plants. It uses a lot less processor speed to render out and make your images. If you have a bunch of small objects that are all the same, I would recommend doing the linked with Alt-D or this button. Otherwise, just duplicate it normally and you'll have a normal object. I'm sorry I couldn't show you how that worked. Yeah, it's acting weird. It's probably because I'm sharing my screen. Sorry about that. You'll have to get in there and play with it yourself. And then we can delete. Of course, it'll remove all this. There's just a button for it. Control-Z undoes that. Or you can just hit delete and delete. Or you can hit X and delete. So there's 3 different ways. The delete button, the X button, and this button here, the delete. And then there's join. So if I select this guy and this one over here, remember these are 2 separate objects. If I select them both and hit join, now they're both one object. And let me just say, we haven't come across this yet. A will deselect everything. Like if I have this one selected, A will unselect everything, and then if I hit it again, it'll select everything, even the camera and the lamp. So if you wanted to know how to deselect something, just hit A, and it'll unselect the A again, selects everything. Now, that little orange button there, that's the origin. It's only in this one. Since that was the last one I selected, it left the origin there with that cube. This set origin, we can do origin to geometry, and it'll move it into the center of the geometry of whatever selected. Let's select it. There we go. Now it's in the middle of that object. Remember that object is these 3, comprised of these 3 meshes. It's these 3 items make up that one object. Or let's go in here and let's move it away from the origin, and now we're back in object mode. Now the origin's lost again a little bit. So let's hit geometry to origin. We're going to move the geometry to the origin. See, just like that. So if you move something in edit mode, it'll leave that origin behind. And if your origin's left behind, make sure you choose origin to geometry. Otherwise, it's going to jump your stuff back to that origin. And then shading. This is used a lot, and there's a way to do this in edit mode as well as doing most of this stuff. Just hit smooth. Now it's taking the average direction that each of these sides are facing to reflect the light. Instead of reflecting light off of each side individually, it's trying to make it appear smooth. And because there's so few sides, it looks kind of weird. When you get higher poly models, it will look better and better. Let's add a sphere here. You can see each of these polygons on this sphere, all these little squares. Let's hit smooth, and now look, it's all smooth. And it's not the best because still that's not very many polygons in that sphere. But it is a good way to make things appear smooth when they're not, because everything's going to be made of polygons and you hardly ever see them in the real world. And then you can just hit flat to change it back to flat. Alright, then history, of course, undo, undo, redo, redo. Repeat last. This one is interesting. So let's say I hit Shift-D and I copy that object over. Let's hit repeat last. We'll just put another one out there, and again, and again, and again. That's what repeat last is. You can also do this by hitting Shift-R. Drag them all out. Now, because I just did undo last, it's not going to do anything else. But like if I drag this up just a little bit and hit Shift-R, it's going to drag it up just that little bit again. That's really handy. Shift-R I would recommend more than hitting this repeat last button. I mean, the buttons, they're there. You can use them if you forget what the hotkey is. But once you learn the hotkeys, everything gets a lot easier and a lot faster. And then history, I don't really ever go in there. It'll show you the history of what you've done. You can also pull this down, this line right here, to show what you've done as well, and it'll show you any errors up there. And then the next tab, that's just the Tools tab. Create tab, this is where you can create your stuff. And it will put things wherever you have this 3D cursor. When you left click, it moves your 3D cursor, and that's where it will put things. You can click on an object, and it usually puts the 3D cursor right on that object. Then let's hit icosphere. Now you have an icosphere whose origin is right aligned inside that 3D cursor. Pretty handy. Or you can hit Shift A. Shift A just puts a menu right on top of your mouse, hovering over what you last chose. And then you can select your meshes, your curves, surfaces, everything. Lamps, cameras, speakers. So I don't really go in the Create tab since I just Shift A all the time to add stuff. And then Relations, that's for making groups. That's a little bit outside of beginner. We're going to skip over that. Animation, we're going to skip. Physics, we might get into a little bit later. Grease pencil, you can just hit D and draw on things. And it just puts it against the view. D and left mouse button. D and right mouse button erases. And that's just if you want to leave yourself a few notes, or I use it to show things. D for draw. And then right mouse button erases, remember. And then you can click Poly here. This is pretty cool. You can draw a line. Now, how do I get out of that? I don't. You can tell I don't really use the grease pencil too very much. I thought I was going to draw on top of the polys, but nope, it's just drawing straight lines. Escape. Well, that could be handy, drawing straight lines. I'm learning something as well. There is a way to draw across the polygons as well, but that's a little bit more advanced, and since I don't use it, I'm not really too familiar with it. That's a grease pencil, and then, oh, that's an add-on that I have for uploading to a website. So, it's all the buttons in object mode. Let's switch over to edit mode, and that will go faster. You can click down here to go to edit mode. I generally just hit tab. Tools, well, these look all the same. Translate, rotate, scale, you can do them just the same, whatever you've selected. But now I'm in vertex mode, so if I have just one vertex selected, I hit G, and I'm just moving that one vertex, and it's going to deform my polygons however I move it. And I can move it with the arrows just the same. Or if I grab everything, it'll move everything. And remember, it leaves that origin point left in the dust. And it's the same with rotate. I grab 2, and then R to rotate. Now I'm rotating both of those polys. Scale, I can scale both of those. And you can lock just these two verts to, let's say, scale Z. Now I'm just scaling them on the Z axis, or scale Y. It'll be better if we do scale X. See, now you can see them stretch and shrink, since that's the direction they were kind of going already. Shrink, fatten, don't really ever use that. Might as well just scale. So, and then push, pull. Generally the same idea. I just use S for scale. I don't really use those buttons too very much. See, I told you it would go faster. Mesh tools. Alright. Now, I do have to point out, in edit mode, you have these 3 extra buttons down here. This one here is for vertex, so that we can select these little points that join the edges that create our polygons. This one here is edges. That's the whole edge between 2 vertices. And then this one here is faces. And you'll see now there's a dot in the middle of each of these polygons so that we can select those individual faces. So, Slide edge, let's go into edge mode and select an edge. Now I can just hit G and grab this and it goes everywhere, all crazy. Or grab it from this side and it goes that way. If I hit slide edge, it doesn't allow it to go outside of the shape of the box. It's going to slide it along those edges, which is why it's called slide edge. And if you're in vertex mode, this is also handy. If you have just one vertex and you want to move it along one of the edges, you hit the vertex button. And then it just moves it along the geometry that you've already created. So instead of just hitting G and grabbing it when you just want to move it a little bit and you forgot to lock it to an axis, you can come up here and hit vertex and move it. And now for slide edge, there's not a shortcut key for that, I don't think. Let's go into edge mode, select an edge, and yeah, that's vertex. Shift V is the vertex slide, edge slide. Shift V, see, now I'm sliding that one vertex. Sliding more than one at a time can get a little tricky and a little bit hairy, and it's not too great an idea, but you can do it if you want. And then let's select all these and click that noise button. It just moves vertices by a noise factor. I've never really used it. There are better ways to do things like that. So I recommend using those instead. Smooth vertex. This is going to be hard to show with these boxes. Maybe. I've kind of deformed them a little bit. Hit smooth vertex, and it's going to kind of shrink everything in relation to everything else just a little bit to try and smooth it out. This is really good when you're making faces and drawing vertexes and edges and making blocky stuff. You can hit that smooth vertex button and it'll smooth out your geometry. Now everything's really small, but it's a lot less wonky than I made it. And then let's just Control Z to undo all that. So that's really handy as well, that smooth vertices, that smooth vertex button. And then extruding. Now we're actually getting into the stuff that builds. So let's select a face, this one here, just right click it. Remember I went into face mode down here. It's these three buttons to switch between face, edge, and vertex. Face mode, and then we can hit extrude region. And it just creates new polygons so that I can pull this up. And it tries to guess which direction you're going to be pulling in and lock it to that, that axis. Now, I can also select this one and hit extrude region, and they'll both come out together going in the average direction that those two are facing. But if I hit extrude individual, watch what happens. They come out by themselves, individually, in their own direction. So let's say you were making a spiked ball. You could pull out, you could extrude individually all of the faces around a sphere, and that would give you the start of all of your spikes because they'd all come out individually. That's a good way to do some certain things that you want. And let's do this. Control Z, get rid of those, and then hit E, and it starts extruding it by region. Hit E again. That's not going to do it. Sometimes you can hover over things and see a shortcut key, but I guess there's not one for extruding individually. E is extrude. And then you can make things as crazy as you want. If you turn off the axis by hitting that letter that it's locked to, like Z again, E and then C, you can drag it based on your perspective and get all kinds of weird things. And then something else. The next one down, subdivide. Let's select this whole object. I hit L a lot to select the whole thing because otherwise you'd have to select this face, hold Shift, select this one. While holding Shift, you'd have to let go of Shift and rotate around it and select all these faces. But if I just hit A to deselect that and hover over one of these little points of to select something and hit L, it selects the whole thing. See, I can select this whole big bad boy, select L, and A to deselect. So let's hit L to select this whole cube and hit subdivide. See, it took each edge and added a vertex in the center of each edge and then connected them across the polygons that we had, the faces that we had, creating vertices wherever it needed. And now I have a vertex there in the middle where it crossed those two edges. And it divided my 6 sides into, what would that be, 24 sides. So this can make a lot of polygons really quickly, and you usually don't need that many. It's good for certain things, but not too many. Now look up here. I have 6,144 faces. That's way too many for anything that I might be needing. And then let's just Control Z, get out of that. We'll go to Loop, Cut, and Slide. This one is very handy. You'll probably be using it a lot. I click that button and I drag it to an edge. Now I have this purple loop going all the way around, and this only works through loops that are made up of 4-sided faces called quads. These 4-sided faces, these quads, are your polygons, and Blender works best in quads. You don't want to use triangles or 5, 6, 7, 8-sided polygons, which are called n-gons, because some of these things, these special things that help make your workflow easier, don't work as well, like loop cut. I click it and then I can slide it. That's why it's a loop, cut, and slide. And when I let go, it's added vertices wherever that loop has crossed my object. It just slides up and down my box. Now something else that's great about it is Control R. That's the hotkey for it. Then I scroll my mouse wheel up and I can add lots of them in all at once. This is great for making windows and buildings, for doing all kinds of things. If I hit Control R and I have to scroll up to however many I want and left click. Now it's going to let me slide these. If I just want to leave them centered in my object, I'm going to right click and that puts them to the center. So let's do that again. Control R and you drag it to the edge that you want to cut around. Left click, and then I drag it where I want, and then I would left click again if I wanted it here. But if I just wanted to leave it at the center, I would right click. Control R, scroll wheel for how many loop cuts I want. Left click to say, okay, that's good, let's slide them. If I don't want to slide them, I just right mouse click and they stay centered. And then Control Z to get rid of those. That's really handy and you'll be doing it a lot. Control R to loop cut, mouse wheel, left click, slide them where you want and left click, see? Or left click and then right click to leave them centered. And duplicate, it's the same as it was for object mode, Shift D, you've created all those objects again. However, now if we tab into object mode, since you added them in edit mode, they're all a part of the same object. Back into edit mode. So that's where you want to be careful, where you add things. And let me show that again. Let's grab this monstrosity here. If I hit delete in edit mode, now I can delete vertices, edges, faces, only edges and faces, only faces. I can dissolve them, and I can delete edge loops and collapse edges. So I've got these edge loops here. I can select the whole edge loop by Alt right clicking. If I hold Alt and right click, it selects that whole edge loop all the way around. Alt right click. This is a lot. You might want to pause it. You might want to practice this. Go back, watch it again to get all these things. These are the basics of how you're going to model just in these tools over here. Alt right click lets you select a whole edge loop. And if I hold Shift, Alt Shift, right click, I can select multiple edge loops. Now I'll hit X to delete, and I will dissolve these edge loops. See, now they're gone, and it doesn't leave behind any vertices like it would if I just deleted edges. Watch, I'll just switch to edge mode, and select this one edge all the way around. Whoops. There we go. And hit X and delete edges. Well, it also took away those faces. So hit X and delete only edges and faces. It took away the edges and those faces. So these act a little bit differently depending on how you select them. Now I'll just select that one edge and hit X, and I'm going to dissolve it to show you what that does. Now that edge is gone, and dissolve that edge. Now if I switch to vertex mode, it leaves behind the vertexes, which are part of my vertex count. Those are going to be rendered even though they're useless. So you want to make sure you get rid of those when you're dissolving edges, and the easiest way to do that is with an edge loop. Just Alt right click, X, and choose Dissolve Edge Loop. So we're getting through everything, getting pretty close. Let's go ahead and do it. Okay. Spin is fun. You click spin. Let's select this guy down here. And it just shoots those around my view. So if I want them locked to an axis, I have to come down here and hit 0 on the ones I don't want it around and 1 on the one I want it around. So now, I have to make sure they're all selected though. Not quite. Okay. Let's hit spin. Yeah. All right, with objects, you might want to start in a perfect view. And 7 puts us on the top. I forgot about that. I usually do this in a different mode. All right, so now it's made 9. See this here under steps? It's made 9 of these boxes and spun them around the Z-axis around this 3D cursor. Wherever that is, that's what it'll spin it around. And it's gone from 0 to 90 degrees with them. I can take this and I can type in 180. Now it's gone halfway around. Or I can just click and drag to the left and right to go all the way around. Now it's overlaid the first box with the last. Or I can just go, right there, so it's all 9 of them. Now it's 8 with the first and the last being overlapped, counting as 1. So this is a quick way to make things all the way around, like bolts for a wheel, things of that nature, and then you can up this 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and now let's rotate it and you can see I've got these overlapping. Let's click remove. Oh, it didn't remove it. Make sure you delete that last one since it's overlapping. That's pretty fun. You can make wine bottles and wine glasses really easy. If you look at my first live episode, I do that a couple of times with a glass and a plate to show you how to use that spin tool in a different way. And then screw. Yep, you have to select a string of connected vertices. So let's select those and hit screw. See, it just screws those vertices around each other into a screw pattern. That's useful. When you get a little bit more familiar with why you would want to use it, you would create a string of vertices like this. I'm just holding Control and left clicking. And it's going to screw this around your perspective. See, so you can do different things with those as well. To create screws, or you can get an add-on to create screws as well. And then knife, like I want to cut these two in half a certain way. I can click on knife, click on that edge, and hit enter. Now that polygon has become 2 polygons. If you do it any other way, it's not going to cut that 1 polygon into 2 polygons. It might just overlay 2 polygons on top of the one, and then you got a problem, because all three of those polygons are going to share the same space, and they're going to be reflecting the same light, and it's going to give you little jagged, weird light and planes. And then select. Not really sure what that did. Huh, it looks like it might have cut through there. I don't really use that one too much. It knifes through the selected faces and none of the others. Okay, that could definitely be handy. Select what faces you want your knife to go through, like if I just want those two, and then hit select. I'm going to go here all the way through that one. Now it's cut a straight line from my perspective through those two polygons and none of the others in between. Whereas if I just hit knife, it would cut through everything. Knife project. I'm not too sure how to use that one. If somebody knows better how to use knife project, tell me in the comments. That'd be great. I've never used it. And bisect. This cuts geometry along a plane that you define. So it's a little bit different than knife. If I click here, and then, oh, I got to select something first. And drag it, I can get a specific angle. This would be used for, like, if I wanted it from this corner, I want this polygon cut radially from this corner. And of course I don't actually need that for this project, but there are reasons that you would want something like that. And there you go. And now remember, you want to work in quads. I've got a triangle here, triangle there, triangle there. It's really going to mess up when I try to hit Control-R and do an edge loop. See, it's not popping up anywhere because it wants to go through quads. It doesn't know where to go next when it hits these weird n-gons and triangles. It doesn't know when it cuts through this one if it should go up here or down here. It just doesn't even try. That's why you want to work in quads. You'll get these weird problems. See, it wants to go through all of these except that one weird n-gon, and that's because it has a vertex here and here. It actually is five-sided, even though these two sides here and here, see, are straight. Alright, almost done. Let's get through it. And I've already showed you repeat last. Just drag that way. Repeat last. And history. Don't worry about UDK export. That's just for my own messing around. Create. Now you'll notice in create you have a lot fewer options than you did in object. And that's because you're not going to be creating lamps and cameras and curves as a part of this object. This is only for editing the mesh. Edit mode is. And if you want to work with curves and NURBS and lamps and cameras, you do all that in object mode because they need to be separate from each other. So that pretty much wraps up everything that we're going to be doing in this video. I'm sorry this one got kind of long because we're going everything that would be of importance on the tool shelf. Hopefully that gets you started, and then next time we're going to be talking about all of these buttons down here in depth along this 3D view panel, and then after that we're going to be talking about all of these buttons over here on your properties window. Okay, see you in the next video.